I tend to forget that, so I'm glad I remembered today. And thank you. Lisa is going to help me admit people in and things like that. So, well, I want to thank you all for being here. This is our Engaging Volunteers During Recovery session, and this is presented by the Michigan Community Service Commission. I'm Melissa Sherry, and I am the Volunteer Impact Coordinator here at the Commission. So let's see.
Okay, so I'm recruiting for this mentoring program.
Oh, if you could mute, I think it's Lindsay, if you could mute. Yeah, so we have a poll that I'm going to launch, and I'll just do a little more of an introduction about our organization and why we're doing this and kind of things like that. So I'm going to launch our first poll. Okay, so our first poll is up. And this is just to get an idea of where organizations have been throughout the pandemic with their volunteers. We're really happy to, there's no shame in it whatsoever. No shame in it whatsoever. So we're all amongst friends, and it's just, it's good to see where folks are at. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about the commission and about our training schedule. So like I said, I'm Melissa Sherry. I'm the coordinator for the Volunteer Impact Coordinator for the commission. And I do a lot with not only volunteerism, disaster work, and then also quite a bit of training. Michigan received something called the Volunteer Generation Fund. And what our goal is with that Volunteer Generation Fund is that we're going to help all the organizations throughout Michigan, yours included, help you build your capacity for engaging with volunteers, for having access to tools that will make a big difference in your ability to manage and support and engage volunteers. So this training is part of it. The training is really kind of a keystone of that, but we also have several technology tools that we're introducing. Some of these include the nonprofit guide, which is a great way for volunteers and potential donors to find your organization. And I ran a volunteer center for many, many years, and a lot of people just didn't know who we were. Those that did loved us, those that didn't just hadn't met us yet, right? And we are looking at this tool to help really raise the awareness of everyone, whether you're a big organization or a smaller organization. So that's what we're hoping to do with that. We also have our Get Connected portal, which we have some work to do on that, but it's a volunteer management database, and a lot of agencies use it just for the recruitment elements. But why I say we have some work to do on that is that there's a lot of potential with that one, and agencies can have access to a free volunteer management database, which would be good. We are also going to be launching a skills-based volunteer platform and a Board Connect platform. So that's just something to think about. And then the trainings, we are going 2 trainings a month. So I have this training, and then next Monday I have another training on volunteer recognition, just to help us get ready for National Volunteer Week and thinking about like how to, in anticipation for spring, when a lot of those kind of things happen, what are we going to do? So know that that's coming up. You can still register for that at any time. And I'll send that link out when I start putting out for this too.
Okay,
and if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, if you don't mind. And then so let's take a look at this here. This is our poll. It looks like the majority of used volunteers all through the pandemic. Yeah, that's awesome. And then, but had fewer volunteers. So that's kind of what I suspected. Some have said that they've had closed, volunteers for safety reasons. That's understandable. And some have been, staff have been home. So yeah, and then just a few lucky few have had volunteers throughout the pandemic with no changes. I would imagine, maybe, I'm guessing some of those could be, oh, let's share those results too, so you see them. Those could possibly be some of our food pantry programs, I'm guessing, but those are, obviously very important. And obviously there was a lot of needs that emerged through the pandemic that are, they're always important during blue sky weather, but when we have a pandemic, it's even more challenging. So thank you for sharing that. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to come away with understanding what are some of your biggest challenges. And then, have you lost some previous volunteers? And are you interested in virtual opportunities? These are some of the things that I think can make a difference as we start to relaunch our programs. If you want to put something in the chat about that, that's perfectly fine. I'd love to hear from you. So let me just make sure here. So then what I want to do is I want to introduce a concept to you. And if you've done a lot with process improvement, this is probably something you're familiar with. If you haven't, this is a quick way to learn a little bit about this. And what process improvement does is it can make something that is very difficult very easy to understand, which can help you convey to someone else that, hey, these are the challenges, this is where we're at right now, and this is how we're going to do this. I would imagine anyone in your position could feel pretty overwhelmed at this moment, thinking about how do we move forward. There's such great, huge needs out there, but it's a lot. It's a lot on your plate. It's a lot on the organization, and there's a lot of people that are counting on you. So I can understand that. So this plan, do, check, act. What sometimes we want to do, and I know I've been guilty of this, you want to get into the do part before you do the plan part. But the majority of the time that you spend on a project, a really successful, well thought out project, 75% of that time should be spent in the planning stages. And you see my little quote from Albert Einstein: if he had a problem and only an hour to solve it, he'd take 55 minutes to think about the problem and 5 minutes about solutions. I love that. And that really does kind of talk to how you plan the process out. And that's what we're going to do today. Is I'm going to give you some planning tips. When you come to a session with me, I talk a lot about planning instead of jumping into the do. There's a lot that we can skip over and we kind of regret a little bit. The other thing is just really understanding what the problem is. I had a leader one time talk about not a well-defined problem. And he talked about, he talked about water in his basement, and he thought it was the dishwasher. And they had just put in this new dishwasher. The old dishwasher leaked. He says it's for sure the dishwasher. And he had somebody come over and look at the dishwasher. He had a plumber come out and look at all the plumbing for the dishwasher. All was fine. Well, what he did is he jumped into the do without understanding what the problem was. So that's kind of something that can happen if we don't give a project the appropriate planning time. And so he wasted a lot of money, some time. And then what he found out, it was he had a window that was broken, that was leaking. So that's what happened to him. So I'm going to help you avoid that with this. So plan, do, check, act. So, and it's a continuous circle too. So once you do your planning, then it's clear you have an action plan and you do, and you check the results, and then you act upon those results, and then you kind of get back to planning. And it might be, nothing is just one and done, especially in our work. Our work is never done. We always have more volunteers that we need to recruit. We always need more volunteers, more programs to support the folks that we serve. So this could be a good life opportunity to think about how you move forward with these things. So here's some of our objectives. We're going to create and document a plan to reintroduce volunteers We've got some staffing matrices that we're going to share. And then planning for the unexpected. We probably have learned, if there's anything we've learned, it's to be flexible and to plan for the unexpected during the pandemic, right? And then evaluating the need versus the risk for volunteer involvement. I think for many organizations, that's what it really comes down to, the risk element. So I've got some tips to help you evaluate that. And then also gaining support within your organization for a return plan. That's also very important. Determine what the needs are for volunteers. They may be very different than they were pre-pandemic. And some of you I know have been, you're new to this job. So maybe you don't have that concept of what it used to be like. And that's perfectly okay. And then we're going to talk about determining what the needs are for volunteers. Yep. And then recruitment. Would you mind, Alvin, muting?
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. That's all right. Yeah, it's okay. Recruitment, re-engagement, and retention strategies. Those are all very important during the pandemic. And maybe since we're utilizing volunteers very differently and they're interacting with us very differently, there may be some things that we have to do differently to maintain those relationships and keep things going forward. Communication is a huge deal during change, during uncertain times. So I want to talk to you about that. And then the dirty work of updating training documents, policies, and handbooks. Oh my goodness, right? And then the fun part about welcoming them back. We'll talk about that today too. Does that sound good to everybody? If you have any questions or if there's something I missed, put it in the chat for us. And Lisa will direct me to it. Okay. Oh, wait a minute.
I don't know if this is going to apply too much to me.
Yeah. Okay. So where to start? So as I've talked about making a plan, and plans need to be flexible. There's, we've looked at this in the last, year and a half, 2 years now, as we've started to kind of think that we're coming out of this, that all of a sudden something happens, a new variant, things like that. And all of a sudden it's just very different. So it's a new approach. So plans that are flexible. And then we're going to talk about using data to support when will be the right time to bring volunteers back. There's a lot of opportunities there to talk about, what's the supporting data. And then that can also help you with your leadership, having those tough conversations about if it's time. Maybe your leadership is all in and that's great, but maybe there's some concerns from the volunteers. And then that can also be used to talk about when it's safe. So everybody's on the same page. It's okay to have a phased approach based on critical needs. And I would actually recommend that. It would be probably pretty hard the first day to start with, a ton of volunteers. But that phased approach, and even the phased approach, if you've had volunteers all the way along, a phased approach at trying new things. This is a lot. You've got a lot on your plate. Most organizations are saying that they have fewer staff now than what they did before. So maybe the answer is, more volunteers, but you have to have a good plan for introducing those volunteers back. And also for expanding those volunteers, because it's one thing when you have a volunteer who's got a lot of experience, but with the organization, but a brand new person, they might not have the best experience if there's no one there available to train them and things like that. So those are things to consider. And then planning ahead for various situations. I think that's critically important. And I think it's something that we're going to recommend that you do with your leadership, and then even reaching out to, who are your stakeholders, things like that. And then also assessing the risk, and then making plans to modify that activity to make it safe. And then the other thing is, if you have access to this, checking with your legal counsel and your human resources. And I would even say check with your insurance carrier. Sometimes we, and this is about planning for the things that are unexpected. So it sounds kind of scary, but we do need to check and make sure that those things are covered. So the first thing we'll talk about is gaining support and understanding the needs. Remember how the dishwasher and it was just really a window. So who are your stakeholders? They may be other volunteers. They may be your leadership staff. They may be your coworkers. Depending on the structure of your organization, they may be board members. They may be committee members. So jotting down who are those stakeholders, and you want to be able to engage with them. Some of the things that you can do, some visioning things, the pandemic has created some great opportunities for us too. Asking what are their biggest needs or challenges that they see in the organization. That's really important because, from where you're sitting, you may think, oh, I got this, but where they are, they see things very differently. So it would be probably pretty enlightening to see where others see the challenges for the organization. And then what stands in our way to overcoming these needs? If you're a food program, it could be the matter of there's more people who need food, emergency food assistance. And what's overcoming those needs? It could be money, it could be space, it could be human capital, human resources to be able to serve those folks. What's standing in our way? It would be interesting for you to document these and then to be able to assess and be able to put in a plan to be able to help the organization overcome these challenges. And really what our roles are in every organization is to root out and find those biggest challenges and be able to solve them. Because most problems can actually be resolved with volunteers. If we're brave enough, we're bold enough, and we set our minds to it, and we have the support of our leadership. So then, what if we could address those? What changes would happen for those we serve if we meet those needs? For a food program, it's that you could eliminate hunger. I mean, that's huge. I hope someday that we can. I mean, we're a country that has a lot. We shouldn't have hunger, but here we are. What are the consequences if we don't find a way to meet those challenges? For many of your organizations that I saw, it's critically important that you do. To think that people aren't going to have basic needs. They're not going to have housing. They're not going to have food. They're not going to have the support systems that they need. It's critically important. So you got a lot on your shoulders there. And then where would there be support for volunteers helping meeting those needs? And this is something after you ask, you ask those things. I used to always ask if you had, at one organization, it was $1 million would have been a lot. But in my next organization, if you had unlimited resources and you could accomplish anything, what would it be? And then what could be some of those opportunities for roles for volunteers? Like if you could hire anybody, what kind of skills would you need? And the beauty of this is that a lot of times volunteers who have those high-paying skills will do this for free and for a lot of reasons, but it's about supporting them. Sometimes they live in your community, sometimes they don't. We're really trying to push a lot of skills-based volunteers, virtual volunteers, and remote volunteers. That's happened a lot during the pandemic because it's just needed to. But to think about those kind of opportunities for your volunteers. So volunteering has certainly changed. Would you all agree that things have been very different since the pandemic? The good old days, right? We can say that, I think. So what are some of the different types of volunteering you want to continue or develop? I just mentioned this, but that virtual volunteering, the advantage of the virtual volunteering is that it can with the use of technology, it can help bring us together, but it can also bring talent to our organizations that we probably couldn't reach before. That person with that skill set that you need doesn't have to live in your community, doesn't even have to live in your state, actually doesn't even have to live in your country. I years ago had a website, and I am not a tech savvy person, but he was an MSU student. He was an international student. And I told him what I wanted. I kind of laid out the website for him and he made it happen. And then he would continue to update it from, of all places, Turkey. So virtual volunteering has happened for years, but it has taken a little more of a center stage during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And then we have hybrid models where people can work in the office and then they can work wherever they work. Those are probably people that are a little closer to home, but it may be something you want to think about with the use of technology that you can do that. And then you'd have to decide for yourself and look at what options there are that will fit those. But then also skills-based volunteering. This is where you can kind of dream big, those things that you think are out of reach because we can't afford that person. It could be a volunteer. And we'll have some more training coming up on how do you really utilize, the kind of some of those best practices. And I hate to always say best practices, but I like to say sound practices. But with skills-based volunteering, there's some things that we know that work better than others. So skills-based volunteering, I'll still say best practices. And then what are your new positions? There has to be things that you're doing that are different now than they were before. Maybe they are some things that staff had done before. You're not supplanting with volunteers, but if those people just aren't there anymore, and then there's some things that they did, volunteers can do a part of what a paid person's job was. They can't do the whole job, but I'm sure that in most situations there is a difference there, and maybe some other things have been assumed by other staff people. So the position doesn't even look like the old position anymore. And then here's a big one. And I don't know if this is as much of a big deal in your organization, but how do you gracefully let go of positions and maybe volunteers that just aren't a good fit anymore? And for me, where I came from, that position, sometimes people were in that role for 30 years and then you have to change things. And oh my gosh, everybody likes change as long as somebody else does it, right? And so we can talk about that. We can talk about how we developed a plan to address that. So here's some things. One of the things you're probably wondering is kind of like, when do we get back to a level of normal? When do we get back to where we can recruit without worrying that someone is not going to be able to serve, things like that? So you need to set some metrics and you need to set a plan. So the metrics are looking at those community metrics to gauge timing. It could be the hospital admissions. It could be it could be like what your schools are doing. It might be related to the new mask changes, those kind of things. But you have to also decide for yourself, are you, even if the schools give up masks, is your organization going to give up masks? You don't have to. I mean, you can decide as an organization. My one thing would be, do not have way more rules for a volunteer than for an employee. So if everybody has to come in and get a temperature check and answer a survey, or everyone has to be vaccinated, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So make sure that it's the same. And then modifying roles. We're going to talk about this a little bit to look at the risk and then how do you modify that risk and to being able to engage volunteers versus just a flat no. And then determining the PPE and the training needs. That is something I never thought I would have to in my career, teach people how to use a mask. I always had used gloves, and some cleaning materials, things like that. That's good, but I never thought it would have to be to this level. So, and then about communication. Communication is key, and you're going to have to communicate to all levels of the organization. It's going to sound like a broken record, but going back to that, what is the risk of not doing this? It's starting to build a story and a case. And you could have a lot of naysayers, but planning ahead and having these metrics, defining the roles, being able to modify risk, knowing what your PPE needs are, even knowing where to get your PPE for those volunteers, and having a communication plan starts to be able to build your story in your case for bringing volunteers back. So a couple obvious things I hope that we all have looked at are the CDC Community Metrics for COVID prevention. There's a lot of things in here that we have to take a look at. Community spread, it probably isn't the time if a new variant is wiping through, your schools. My girlfriend, she's a kindergarten teacher in the school that we grew up in. And a few weeks ago, when the Omicron was just crazy, they said on the news, and then she said the same thing, that people were dropping, teachers were dropping, students were dropping. And by the end of the day, they realized they needed to go on to virtual because it was too hard to operate class with that few students. And I think that was part of the issues. They didn't even have enough students to count it for the day. So look at community spread. Maybe it wasn't this situation at a different community next door, but for them it was. The next thing is health system capacity. We have some of our volunteer generation partners have talked to us, and we had one in Flint who said, we can't do an MLK day, that just the hospitals are too full. I thought that was hugely responsible of them, actually. And I kudos. They had a great plan. They had a great project. It would have been great. But the reality was it wasn't a responsible thing to do at the moment because they couldn't do that to the health system. And then vaccination coverage. A lot of organizations are saying, you have to be fully vaccinated. That is up to them. I know that there's a lot of emotion about that, but it's up to you whether they need the booster too. And then looking at those early detections of COVID increases. And, this is something working closely with your health department to see where those things are at. And then assessing who's the populations that are at risk. We obviously know that a lot of older people are at risk. And I think you kind of have to tread on that a little carefully, but you can modify those things so that those people can participate, but maybe in a safer way. So take a look at those things if you would, and we'll move on. So evaluating the volunteer numbers and needs. For you, you're going to have to develop your own volunteer staffing matrix if you haven't already. And what this does is it's really kind of, and I'm going to show you an example of one I just totally made up, but we will send you this matrix and feel free to adjust it however you want, whatever works for you. But looking at that staffing matrix and understanding what is the priority, what do you need? And what it does, I think I can go to the next page and I'll show you. See, if you take a look at this, it kind of does take a look at, tells the story. It talks about what the position is, the priority. If it's a level 1, maybe that's most important. A level 3 is nice, but it doesn't have to happen. And then what is the metric? What has to happen for us to trigger this position? What are the hours? What are the needs? What is a potential date for return, knowing that it has to be flexible? Does this have to be in person or virtual? What is the training? And who's the staff? Because you always need to have staff that's helping. So, look at this, like in activity assistant, Lisa's going to do the training. Liz is going to help with the PPE, and Tim is going to do the testing. All those people have to know when they're going to do this. And it's, so it puts everybody on the same page. It starts to tell a communication plan. And it's okay to share that with your volunteers too. So as you could see that there were some positions that were more of a priority on there. I didn't expect you to memorize it, but then taking a look at the target dates of when you think that could happen. And then addressing any policy changes that are impacted by COVID. I think that is also pretty huge, for what we're doing, taking a look at those policies. making sure that they're not overly stringent on volunteers, that they're consistent with staff, they're consistent, and they're applicable and they're doable. I think that's another thing. And then, always going back in that communication plan about communicating and confirming support and the availability of the team for training and to be able to supervise the returning volunteers. Some of the things that I think that are really important is that consistency of communication. So everybody is on the same plan. They know what the goal is, that we're bringing. Oh, Jessica, do you mind muting yourself? Thanks. And then just being able to have the people on hand to do the work that needs to be done, and that they know when a volunteer is starting, they know when they're going to be here, things like that. You may even want to take that a step further. And if you have certain dates for training, that you even have those blocked out on those individuals' calendars, and that they know who's coming for training and things like that. And then ensuring that there's ample PPE available for volunteers. Determining on what you expect for PPE, I think, is really important. What your organization obviously expects. Is a cloth mask okay? Does it have to be a KN95? Are those available? Those kind of things. And maybe we're at the point where PPE is not such an issue, but I hear across the state in different areas where masks are still needed pretty widely. So they need new masks. So ensure training materials are ready by the target dates. I think that's pretty clear. Volunteers are going to need, especially new volunteers, but maybe not so much volunteers that have been here with you for a while, but maybe those volunteers that have stuck with you throughout the pandemic and are very familiar with the training and the expectations. Maybe they are people that are in a position to be able to help you develop those training, update those policies. Maybe they can help you update the handbook, and maybe they can help you train, which would alleviate some burden on staff.
I think she's froze. Let's give her a minute.
Thought so far. Go ahead and put it in the chat.
You froze up and we didn't hear or I didn't hear the question. Maybe it was not just me.
Yeah,
I'm
we don't know what
sorry.
to put in.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? And it just said that it just said that it was unstable. Sorry. What I was going to say is just, put your thoughts in. What are your thoughts about creating the plan? What do you think some of your challenges are? Where are you at right now? Did everybody get that? I think I get the message that my internet was unstable for a second after I've said it. So I love the matrix idea. Yeah. And I think it does help kind of keep things organized and clean, and starts to tell that story for you. Yeah. And we'll send that out in our follow-up. Well, go ahead. Okay, positions are only in person. So that's it. Yeah. We're going to talk about those comfort levels in a minute. Yeah. Finding new ways to engage and be safe. Absolutely. We also have a checklist, and some of these things I think are pretty obvious now, but we can also take a look at that. And I would say, a lot of those in-person things, there's no doubt a lot of it has to be done in person for a lot of reasons, but there could be like expansion opportunities, really being able to do some really different, unique things that maybe that's how you would involve volunteers. The inconsistent times we need volunteers, it makes it hard on us. Okay, yeah. And then keeping everyone on the same page of understanding. Changes should be addressed immediately. Yeah. And then we're struggling to recruit volunteers. Okay. Our rules for volunteers haven't changed much. Okay. It's so, we also have a recruitment session too. And we we'll probably put that out here pretty soon as well. So I think that's great. And we're going to talk about that here. Engagement, not only reaching out when needed, but also in constant contact with them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think these are great. You've got some great comments here. Okay. I'm going to go back to this, but Lisa, do me a favor. If there's something here, just let me know. Oops. Okay. So I showed you this. Like I said, you're going to get a copy of this. It'll be blank though. And then checking in with your existing volunteers. I don't know how many have done this, but we're hearing a lot of organizations that are using surveys to really kind of gauge where folks are with their comfort level with service and remote, virtual, if it's available. It sounds like a lot of you understandably have a lot of in-person things, which have some extra challenges. So there, one of the things about asking if they're willing to help with new and emerging needs, or, if you don't have new and emerging needs, it's the same things that you had, but asking them to maybe help in different ways. And then the survey should really, you should be asking a couple things. One, are they, giving them a sense of what the challenges are? Recruitment is a challenge. So are they willing to help you with recruitment? And that could be in a lot of different ways. I mean, I used to have volunteers that would, before the pandemic, go to a recruitment events. During the pandemic, I've had volunteers that will post things on, the Get Connected and some of the other online services that we have. And then I've had volunteers help me onboard new volunteers just because there's just so much going on. So thinking about what they could do to help you bring those folks on. And I'm sure as dedicated volunteers, they just have to be asked and properly trained. But we can certainly help them with that. And then the commission, our organization has training that they can participate in like this. And that would be great. We'd love to have volunteers in here too, so that they can kind of get a sense of what to ask, what to look for. And then you as the volunteer professional are monitoring this, and you're checking in and you're approving things as you go along. But you can get a lot of help with those kind of recruitment activities, looking at your volunteer base, and a lot of those things they can do at home. But ask, so if a volunteer has decided to leave, celebrating his or her service, you can do it with a small gift, a thank you, or even providing a letter of recommendation. I think those are all, ways to keep that relationship positive, but understanding that a lot of people have moved on. If you're wondering, like, where are the volunteers? Who are these people? I can't find them. The vast majority of Americans have been surveyed about their volunteer experience and their thoughts about volunteerism. And they've actually said that they believe that most of the challenges that are in communities right now could be significantly helped or solved with the use of volunteer involvement. And then there's this whole new crop of volunteers that have come out of woodwork, and they are staying with it. It's a lot of younger people. They are sticking with volunteering. It's gone on for quite a while, and they have kind of challenged the norms about how we've done things, but we may have to reach them in different places. That recruitment training really does go into this if you joined us for that basic series, or we can repeat it later if you'd like to. We'd love to do that. I think I'm going to be recording many of those, to be honest with you. So, but anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And then, so looking at who you have as volunteers, what kind of skills do they have? What is it that you think that they could do for you? And maybe do things in some different ways, and, keeping, talking to them about it, communicating. One of the things that happens in the survey, I find a really valuable question would be, if we did this, what would the impact be to your service? So if we brought volunteers back and everybody was back as usual, what would the impact be for you? What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? And being able to understand what those thoughts and concerns are. Jennifer, would you mind?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. And so understanding what those thoughts and concerns are gives you the opportunity to be able to address them. But specifically asking that, I think, is important. It could be, it's a lot of hand holding. I will admit it's a lot of hand holding, but it is way easier to retain a volunteer than it is to go out and find a new one. So kind of this goes to that as well. Supporting those volunteers. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but communication. So when they're going to be trained, on whether it's on new responsibilities or protocols, just being, very straightforward and doing probably over communication. Sometimes people need to hear something 7 times, 7 different ways before they really understand it. And that for us can seem like a daunting task. But again, using having the help from your existing volunteers and that shared responsibility for volunteers amongst your entire staff is critically important. It's not just on you, but that's also why you have to go back and get that leadership buy-in as well. And then providing that personal protective equipment, deciding what it is that you need and being able to move forward. If your organization does not have enough PPE, I say reach out to me because I'm dealing with PPE all over the place. So I can get you some PPE, I'm pretty sure. And then installing items like the plexiglass screens at the welcome desk, if you haven't already, really focusing on those directional things for the hallways, the social distancing, the markers, the reminders. And then I know it probably is to the point where we're all really bored with that and we might not even see it anymore, I suspect. But I think that the other thing it does is if we remind our staff about this and that we're making effort to really abide by this, I think one of the things that it can do for our volunteers is reassure them that this is a safe place. And then redesigning or moving those work areas where there's ample social distance. This is all in that checklist. So, but then here's some other things. Providing scripting to volunteers to interact safely with the public. The scripting is in your training, I think, to say, this is what we want you to say. You do not want volunteers to have to connect the dots on their own and maybe say something that isn't really, maybe not ideal. Not that they would do something really wrong intentionally or anything like that. I don't think that. But when I hear or see things that aren't really that smooth, what it tells me is that they try to connect the dots on their own and they maybe get stumped on a question. But it goes back to anticipating the unexpected and asking volunteers that, and asking the volunteers pretty consistently, what are the questions that you're getting asked? What are some of the things that you need help with? Those are all really important. And then offering those trainings on those safety protocols, having a training told to them. Oh, I know. Whenever I would offer something new, like a new training, I did it in a couple different ways. Something was always, verbally shared with them. And I would say, you know what, this is probably not going to make a lot of sense, but we're going to talk through it. And I would create even just a flow chart. It would be from, you walk in the door, you check in, you go here, you do this, all the way to the end of the day when they check out or return the keys or whatever it is. And so even absent the training, they had the opportunity, with a sheet, they could fumble through it and figure it out. So what I would do is I would tell them, so they would hear it verbally. I would let them have those sheets so that they could review it. And then also when they would see it in action, I think everything kind of started making more sense. And then they had an opportunity to be supported and for them to be able to do the task. So you're seeing it in different ways. And that was always really key to making sure that people were well trained. And sometimes you do still have to go back and do reminders and things like that. But usually a lot of times it's a misunderstanding in the training. But, doing this in all these different ways, it starts to touch on their different learning styles as well. And then this is huge, and I know we all know this, but offer lots and lots of check-ins, offer reassurance and communicate your openness and for questions and input. We would do a lot of what we call rounding, and we would ask, we would always try to do it in a positive way. We would say, so what's working well for you? What are some of our processes that you think you could help us make better? Those kind of questions. And so your volunteers will see things in different ways. So I mentioned this before, that for me, this was a huge thing. When you had to alter or eliminate a volunteer role, there's, really good reasons for having to do that. But a lot of times there was a lot of heartache because the volunteers were really attached to it. They liked it. It was a part of their identity. And so when something has to change, when something has to be altered significantly, it can be pretty scary. My best advice to you is make these changes with the volunteers, don't make them for them. So, and it always involve those closest to the work. The way that we started to do this, and we just got it down to a process, that the first thing we would do is we would hear that there was an issue, or we knew that we'd have to make a change. And so what we would do is we would send out a survey to every volunteer that does that role. And we'd say, we want to hear what your feedback is. If you don't have a large organization, you can ask the volunteers, but just say, I have some questions. I just want to talk through them and ask every single question, which are things like, this has been proposed. What are your thoughts about this? How would this impact your service personally? What do you think we could do to make this better? And by the time I was done, actually, it was so easy to make these changes. And if there was anybody who made it so that they couldn't volunteer anymore, or they weren't going to do it, I would work with them to find something else for them to do. And so we took care of the person, you took care of the position, and they would then take care of the work that needed to be done. So I would say, don't go into this, your mind made up, until you hear from.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay. I think I got muted maybe too, I don't know. But so don't make up your mind until you hear from others. There's always many facets to these things. And then it's always personal to that volunteer. So respond in a personal way that you're taking care of them. But you have things that you have to do for the organization. So being, utmost respectful, honest, and open, I think is huge. And then keeping the communication positive, and then always thanking volunteers for their input and communicate anticipated changes. So when we would do this, we had a lot of volunteer involvement. I would survey them. We talk as a group. You could do this over Zoom. And then by the time that the change happened, they were like, make the change already. Everybody was fine with it. And so I thought that was like a really cool way to do it. And it was something for me that caused me a lot of angst, because I know it was so personal to them, but it was able to help us quite a bit. Okay, what is happening to my computer? Come on. Okay, so inevitably you're going to have to update some policies, procedures, and trainings. Again, all that communication. Take a look at your staff policies. What are some of those new things? And then this is another thing I would always do, is rating each role's risk to COVID exposure and making that clear to volunteers. We used when I worked in a hospital, and we did it for bloodborne pathogens, and there was an A, B, or C risk. And so like A was most likely you're going to come into contact with that. B, it's possible. And C is like, it's unlikely, but it could happen. And so, do the same thing for this. If it's somebody who is taking care of young children, well, chances are it's probably an A in that case. But if it's somebody who, serves in a back office, it's probably a C if they don't have a lot of contact with the public, for example. So just a reminder about your handbook and your training documents, making sure that those are done. Giving yourself time in this planning process to create these new position descriptions. And if you're like, how am I going to find time to do this? Honestly, look to your current volunteers. Look to your current volunteers. They can very much help you figure out how to do this. And they've been in the trenches with you this whole time. You can give them an outline and they could, it'll be easier for you to kind of tweak from there. And then they may know what the safety requirements are already. So lean on those folks. And then right there, you could have created yourself a remote or hybrid position. And then how volunteers are interacting safely with others while serving, and always have your staff also look at this too, and then determine how training will be delivered to those volunteers, because hopefully you're going to have lots of new ones, especially after you take the recruitment session too. And then have volunteers sign and personally acknowledge the guidelines of using PPE correctly. I think that is really, really important. I think you have to show them, you have to tell them, you have to have some pictures to demonstrate this is how a mask is worn appropriately. This is when you glove, this is when you wash your hands. It might sound really mundane, but it's something that is really important. So developing that communication plan, it's things like updating your website and, writing down a list of where all these communication things. We would send out a lot of things via email updates, so they wouldn't actually hit the handbook till later. And that was fine. But, having some things on the website was good. And then it was all right there. So then we just cut and pasted it right into the handbook when we did our handbook update. So, but communicating those, updating all your communication materials. It might be your recruitment messages. It might be, your social media, things like that, being consistent about that. And then offering easy to understand documents that demonstrate the protocols. I would say like photos, the written documents in bullets is good, and that make them easily accessible. It could be on your website, it could have been emailed to them, but make sure that they're seeing it. And then creating a social media campaign. We are going to actually have a social media session. And how do you recruit volunteers using social media? I think that's going to be huge. And what we are looking for is there's a lot of ways that people are, even bypassing those Get Connected and things like that. And we have Get Connected. I love Get Connected. But putting it out in social media, people see it right then and there. There's proof that my generation tends to a lot of times be moved to donate and also volunteer because they've seen social media messages. Now, keep in mind, I have Snap. I communicate with my cousin, and who's 10, and her cousin, well, the other cousin who's like 13. Those are my best friends on Snap. It's probably not the way to get me, but good old Facebook, I'm on Facebook enough. So that might be the way to go. And then, I would always say create a frequently asked questions document for not only your website, but also, for that COVID thing, the COVID reentry plan. Putting that on your website, I think, is great for volunteers to know and see and to understand what the expectations are. You don't want to get somebody down the road on an onboarding process and find out, I'm not wearing a mask, or I'm not going to be vaccinated, those kind of things. So, and then I would also, just to be prepared, and again, have your team help you. Set up a temporary automatic email that that can answer some of those reentry questions. They may be like pre-canned things that you can just cut and paste and put in to respond to a volunteer or a potential volunteer. And then creating scripting to help answer questions effectively. Those could be for your staff. It could be for your current volunteers. It could be for yourself. But when you have these tools in your back pocket, you're not wondering like, what do I say? And then again, connecting those dots and maybe not sounding, maybe regretting what you said, or, like, oh, I don't know, and things like that. So And then plan for those regular updates to volunteers via email. I think that's absolutely huge. And then have a way of, if you have volunteers that are not on email, lean on some of your volunteers to do a phone call to check in with those people who don't have email. And then celebrate those volunteers on social media, celebrate them in Zoom meetings, find ways to do those kind of fun celebration moments. I think it's absolutely huge for volunteers. And Monday I have the recognition one. So join me for that and you'll get more. So welcoming back, when you welcome back volunteers, it can simply be like a "we missed you." I mean, put up a banner, just tell volunteers you love them and you miss them. Update your website and your social media. We would have a check-in screen and we would put fun messages on there. And then post thank you notes in volunteer areas. Have other people involved in it. Have your clients involved, have your staff involved, have your board members involved, and then hold an outdoor welcome back party. Believe it or not, at some point we will get back to spring. It'll be a little warmer in Michigan where this is possible. But having that kind of fever and that culture of being appreciative and excited about volunteers, that's a huge thing for volunteers to walk into. And those are some of the things that start to create those bonds between the organization and the volunteer, that they know that they're welcomed and they're appreciated. And the welcome back banner, I love that. And then just being very present and prepared to solve problems. I think those are just absolutely huge things. So a few more things, and we're almost at the end of our time. We've got like 2 more minutes here. So we have a checklist that we're going to send out. It's going to help you understand whether this is the time to bring volunteers back, things like that. And then make sure that you understand your requirements, but they're similar to the employees, but not too restrictive, like not more. Follow those local recommendations and then all the way up to the federal. Determine your PPE and vaccination and create visual reminders for volunteers about the PPE requirements and have those all listed on your website. If I can do this, let me launch our very last poll and get your feedback here. This is about, just kind of like, did you come away with some ideas, things like that? One size does not fit all for everyone, but we sure would love to be able to give you the opportunity to ask questions and see if there's more that you'd like to know about. So in the chat, if there's something that you were hoping to get today and I didn't cover it, let me know and I can stay around for a few minutes. Yeah, the PowerPoint will be available. I'll send that out with the slides and the recording. Oh, great. Thank you, Kimberly. I'm glad. You should check out our other trainings that we have. And I'd love that. I'll send out that link to everyone. And then pretty soon here, I'll have the 2022 entire calendar. So yeah. Oh, great. Thank you, Maria. Oh, thanks, everyone. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you all being here. I will be following up with those. It sounds like we've got a lot of new people. This is great to the field. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, a deeper dive into retention and recruitment. I do have those, Sherry, and we have those sessions already built, so we can bring those back out. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it sounds like for the vast majority of folks, we gave you some new ideas, which I can't wait for more sessions. Oh, that's great. What we're really hoping to do is build a network with all of you across the state. Your work is so incredibly important. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for what you're doing for individuals, for children, for older people, for everyone in your community. And it is just really meaningful. And And I really, really, truly appreciate it. With that, I will let you go and know that I will send out this recording. And it takes a little bit for it to upload and things like that, but look for that probably tomorrow, I'm thinking. And we will be getting the more trainings out to you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to Lisa for being my my helper today. I really appreciate it. Oh, take care, everyone. Bye.